Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are, because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is X Marks the Spot. Yeah! Otherwise known as the electrifying conclusion of the Guidestones trilogy. And we left things off talking about what the Guidestones could be. Right? Is it a clock and solar calendar? Sure. Right? Is it commandments for future generations after post-apocalyptic whatever? Certainly clearly part of its design, right? But could there be more? What else could this thing be? And so what do we know? Right? We know the Guidestones are made of granite, or at least that's what we're told it's made out of, right? And so what's granite? Granite is a coarse-grained, intrusive igneous rock composed mostly of quartz, alkali feldspar, and plagioclase, whatever that is, right? And so what's an intrusive igneous rock, you may wonder? Intrusive rock is formed when magma penetrates existing rock, crystallizes, and solidifies underground to form intrusions. And I love this diagram they had in the intrusive rock wiki for these plutonic rocks. All these happy triangles over here. It's a triangle party, that diagram. So now, if granite is just crystals and other rocks infused with magma, and Elberton is the granite capital of the world, then that means at one time Georgia was covered in lava. And so by reason then, Georgia must have been near a volcano at one point in geological history, right? So if we were to believe what the geologists tell us about granite rock, right? And so when was the last time a volcano erupted on the East Coast? I'm certainly not aware of any volcanoes on the East Coast, although driving through the Smokies of western North Carolina, you see a lot of mountains that look like volcanoes. And I always imagine them as pyramids buried, but what do I know? And so according to Backey's own geological survey, they believe as recently as 50 million years ago. But most of the volcanic activity in this area seems to have taken place over 200 million years ago when the realm was still Pangaea. And so at that time, it says that volcanoes dotted Virginia for millions of years. All right, so here's Virginia here, right? And at one time, these mountain ranges must have been rife with volcanic activity, right? Enough so that 250 million to 50 million years ago, they erupted and covered this area of the United States in lava, right? And in Georgia here, creating the greatest concentration of this crystalline, quartz-infused magma that becomes granite. At least this is what, geology is telling us, right? And there's at least one modern geologist who believes that this is a reawakening fault line here, and that these volcanoes could be becoming active again, right? Especially this one, Chimney Mountain in Helen, Georgia, which is very close to our area of Alberton here. And the amazing thing about this article, and I'm going to try to remember to link it, is that it talks about the Native American presence in this area and how they venerated this area of northeastern Georgia as the home of their gods. All right, so also something very interesting to keep in mind in regards to the possible placement of the Georgia Guidestones and what that could mean. And so this granite here in northeastern Georgia and western South Carolina, right? The finest granite in the world. It is the rock of choice for our friends at the Enoch Society and their Guidestones, right? But my friend William disagrees that granite is igneous rock, right? He says granite and marble are man-made geopolymers. Marble is poured like an epoxy. And so I would have to imagine that granite would be as well in this situation. And now this makes a whole lot more sense when you want to talk about the practicality of building things, and especially these giant stone, these megalithic structures, right? Being able to pour this stuff, makes a whole lot more sense than quarrying it and dragging tens to hundreds of thousands of pounds, across open land and up mountains and things like that, right? I mean, being able to pour it just makes a whole lot more sense. And so now if this is true, that puts a completely different tenor on the construction of the Guidestones, right? But none of that changes what's in granite. And the principal ingredient in granite is, of course, it's very heavy in quartz. And so quartz is a crystal resonator, right? It has a high Q resonator, whatever high Q means, I don't know, right? But resonators are used to generate waves of specific frequencies. So that means that quartz gives off a certain vibrational energy. It has a signature. It gives off a signal. But not only that, quartz has memory. Now look at this. Quartz coin can hold 360 terabytes of data for billions of years. And now this is Forbes magazine, and this was an article published on March 20th, 2016. So 5 years ago already. All right, so this article from computerdisposals.com says eternal memory crystals, fiction or mind-blowing fact. And so that article says that through an innovative method of laser etching, copies of the Magna Carta, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the King James Bible have now been digitally stored on the remarkable coin-sized memory crystals made of nanostructured glass. And again, I just cannot believe how on the right track I was with that Master of Reality thing. But even more important is I wonder if these quartz coins are King John's penny sized, right? Or smaller. Who knows? I don't know. But just think about the information that can be held in a quartz crystal. And if they vibrate and put out energy, that information could then be disseminated and broadcast out into the atmosphere. And so if all of that is true, well, then maybe the Georgia Guidestones are projecting out memory or some other form of information into our environment. And that there is no time capsule buried under here. The Georgia Guidestones are an eternal time capsule broadcasting out its message. Maybe the mission of the geniuses at the Enoch Society was to get that thing going all along. And they used their society and their Georgia Tech Institute to either create or filter their already existing technologies through Georgia Tech and get this Georgia Guidestone thing built, right? And because when I think of the configuration of the Georgia Guidestones, I think about this bit on a satellite dish, right? So now imagine that underneath this, would be like a dish type structure, because you have to think that in order to withstand the test of time, these things would have to be firmly rooted deep in the earth, right? And so if you're trying to project out a signal, well, then location, as with most other things, is everything, right? And there's nothing random about the placement of the Georgia Guidestones in Elberton, Georgia, because I just happen to know that in 1851, Alexander Dallas Bakke was involved in the coast survey map of the Savannah River, which is the river that pretty much divides Georgia from South Carolina, right? And look at that, the source of this river here, the source of the river is right at Elberton, right? And so now who knows what Alexander Bakke could have found with his magnetic measurements along here. And maybe this granite plateau in Elberton here was the perfect place, had just the right amount of magnetic activity. Now I couldn't really find anything, and again, I'm not really good at that, of whether or not granite in and of itself or quartz in and of itself has magnetic properties. But if quartz is a resonator, perhaps it could be magnifying in some way these magnetic properties potentials, right? Or that magnetism is boosting the already existing vibrations of the quartz. And I say plateau earlier because it is about 750 feet above sea level. Certainly not the highest peak, but depending on the type of signal and where you're directing that signal, maybe the perfect peak, right? Who knows what could be encoded in all of this quartz hidden therein, right? It's just, it boggles my mind, right? Billions and billions of years it could be stored, right? 360 terabytes in a quartz coin. Think about how many coins could fit in a structure this size. And so with its solar and lunar alignments and its celestial alignments, making for a clock and calendar, the makers of the Georgia Guidestones clearly intended this thing to last. And as I was saying, if you were expecting it to survive earthquakes and volcano eruptions or whatever, what have you, you want to make sure this thing is still standing, right? If you're expecting the survivors of which to orient themselves around it, right? And create a new society around it. And so what that tells me, other than that Elberton, Georgia sounds like just about the safest place in the world right now, right, is that these monuments need to be secure, as I was saying. There's no way the Elberton Granite Finishing Company placed these stones. You need a singularly precise touch for a job like this. So who could have done it? Well, let's not forget Big Doc's military associations, right? With the Naval Academy and the Citadel. And we also have to keep in mind that Georgia Tech today has ties to the military. The Department of Defense funds Georgia Tech to enhance U.S. hypersonics capabilities. You have to believe, and this is just one example, you have to believe that the Department of Defense is using Georgia Tech for one aspect. They could be using it for others, and there could be very deep ties between Georgia Tech and the military and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And surely some of those engineers would have passed through the Anak Society. I don't think there can be any doubt about that, right? It would just be too great a coincidence for no engineers for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to have passed through the Anak Society, I would think. And when you think about it, who else in the public sphere of knowledge could be capable of such construction? Aside from, again, we don't know what could be in the private sector. They could have all kinds of stuff, all kinds of machines that would make building that thing unbelievably easy. But in terms of the narrative that we have, who in this narrative could be capable of it? And I have to believe, if not directly, perhaps those who have done double duty in the Anak Society and in the Army Corps of Engineers, donated their time and resources to get this thing done for their Anak brotherhood and their mentors, the Emersons, right? And so I think this really kind of completes the story of who built the Georgia Guidestones, and perhaps adding to the story or the mystery of what the Georgia Guidestones could be, right? And I just want to let everybody know, I did no research on the Georgia Guidestones for this. The click here that I did for the last video, I watched the first 2 minutes of and said, yeah, this is going to be good, and put it up there, right? Because I didn't want to taint what I was going to find with any other information, right? And so this was the 100% Baltimore Fats take on the Georgia Guidestones, right? But the story is not done here. Oh no, my friends, not even close, right? Because when I was setting up my volcano shot here from Google Earth, right? This image is from Google Earth. I happened to notice that the Georgia Guidestones, which are here, this dot, happen to fall pretty much in line with my Fort Morgan to Fort McHenry alignment, right? And so here that is. Look how close it comes. And to get even closer, right here, the Georgia Guidestones, I mean, that is really unbelievable, right? And so I was like, God, how can this alignment get any more crazy? And here's how, right? That alignment pretty much runs parallel to this axis here. And so I just want to take a second here to point out the poor quality of this image here. This looks like bad graphics from a PlayStation 1 game, like circa 2002 or something. I hope the graphic designers at Google Earth are embarrassed by this. And if they're not, then this is done deliberately. Because my friend Virginia, in my hype post for the Georgia on My Mind video, she commented that the top of the Georgia Guidestones are allegedly covered in stains, as if it could have been used as a sacrificial altar at one point. And she did get some support there, so who knows? I don't know, but it's definitely very curious that this is definitely not the top of the Georgia Guidestones, right? And so I just wanted to point that out real quick. But all right, so now seeing that this axis went parallel to the Morgan-McHenry line, I wanted to see where it went, right? And so I started this line here, and now this is just tracking it north, and sure enough, it follows that same trajectory, right? As you would imagine it should, right? The Morgan-McHenry one would just be running slightly parallel. And of course, this thing's going to go a little bit off, but it goes right through Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, New Haven, Boston, clips the coast of Maine up here, right, and on through Nova Scotia and into Newfoundland. But unlike the Morgan-McHenry line, it passes right through Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It's hard to get any closer to the Capitol, really. I mean, how much of a coincidence could that be? Right? And so when we take it across the pond, this line goes right through Ulster. Right? How could that be? But it seems to have cut England off right at the waist. Right? And take a look at this. Miss Dora Vernon, look how close this line comes to Sheffield. And Sheffield, of course, plays an unheralded role in the story of the COV and its impact on the world today, right? Incredible the way this Georgia Guidestone axis lines up, right? So, you bring it across into Central Europe, it cuts through the Netherlands, through Germany and Austria. And now when I was doing this line, it would not let me extend it past this point, right? Without getting all wonky. Like, it will not let you draw, at least me anyway, it would not let me draw a line that would circumnavigate the globe from one point to another, right? The line just gets all wonky after a certain point. And so I just want to show you where this line stops, and it stops in a really amazing place. Like, this cannot be a coincidence. And Drac, if you're still out there, it stops right at Budapest. Look how close the line comes to Budapest. Cannot be a coincidence there. You know, just unbelievable the way these things work, right? You know, when you have apophenia, as bad as I got it. And so I continued that line on. I mean, you know, I just created a new line to see where else it would go. And it goes, so it extends from Magyar here through Romania and Bucharest. This just gets more unbelievable as this thing heads into Istanbul. And unfortunately, I didn't bring up stills for this, but it goes right by Istanbul, but also Çatalhöyük is right in here. Amazing. I mean, it's just crazy to me, the alignment that I'm getting off of this. It's just crazy the way this Georgia Guidestone alignment connects, because moving on into Syria, look how close it comes to Palmyra. Right? Joseph Smith, anyone? Right? And the Mormons? Maybe the Mormons do have something to do with the Georgia Guidestones. But not only that, it goes right to Ur, one of the earliest settlements in the history of mankind. Right? The Sumerians lived there. That's where Abraham was from, wasn't it? Right? And this giant ziggurat here, you know, the oldest, earliest ziggurat or whatever. You know, these things are amazing looking. You know, what the heck were they using this thing for? You know, but unbelievable that this alignment from the Georgia Guidestones goes right that way and to those places. Cannot be a coincidence. I don't care about how much apophenia you may have. It's just incredible, right? So I wanted to see, well, what happens if I make this X, right? Because X marks the spot. Here it is. This is the Georgia Guidestone quartering the Earth. Or Google Earth anyway. All right, so I'm not going to follow these lines all these other ways, but, you know, really an amazing story. And if this is indeed projecting something out, to give you an idea of how it may be doing so, you know, I don't know. Or if it's meant to be the central point for the new world, you know, how the new world is going to be divided in some way. I don't know, but I do love the way this looks. So, okay, and so I'm wrapping up season 4 here, and the reason for that is, unfortunately, tragedy has struck. All my windows on Alexander Dallas Backey got closed, and I was unable to restore the tabs as they were. So now the research, of course, is still there in my history, but now I need to sort of take the time and take stock and decide whether I want to continue with that story. The story of the U.S. Coast Survey was going to be a very difficult story to tell, but a very important one if you were looking to bridge that gap between the old world and the new world and the energy systems and things like that. I think the story of the U.S. Coast Survey is very important in that. And, you know, maybe someday I'll get back to it. I don't know. But, you know, I want to close this one out with a little cherry. And it's something I've been giving a little bit of thought to because of the Cyclops and everything, and relating that to the all-seeing eye. And that is that solitary eyes, such as the Cyclops and the all-seeing eye, lack depth perception. You know, a one-eyed man doesn't have depth perception. One eye cannot gauge depth effectively. And that's something I think we need to be aware of in terms of how deep we think these things go. Okay, and so I'm going to wrap this one up here. Remember, guys, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies, right? And so until the next one, cheers.